Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
Pint Glass Football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. What's up, PGF Nation? PFF recently released its article ranking the top 25 players under 25 entering the 2024 season. We'll debate this list today. We'll tell you where they got it right and where they got it wrong. But joining me, like always, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
Brad is being very modest today because today is someone's birthday. He thought I didn't know or I forgot about it, but happy birthday to Brad.
Hey, man, I appreciate that. We get so wrapped up into talking football, man. We didn't even mention it, but I appreciate that big time, man. This is going to be a fun episode. I might be getting old, but these guys are young, and we've got some of the best young players in the league to talk about today, Alex.
Brad, to start this out, Trevor Lawrence at number 3. I'm upset. And it's irritating. This is one of the most overrated players on this list. If not, actually, it's the most overrated person on this list at number 3. And I guess we can attribute it to him being a quarterback because immediately right out the gate, I would move him, at least for the quarterbacks on the list, I would immediately get him out of number 3 and put him lower and put Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud, either one of them in that spot over him, simply because this guy out of the 3 quarterbacks on this list, he's the worst one. Based on the play, I get the metrics and I understand all of that, but I'm not sure how the mental aspect of the game, a guy that throws the ball out of bounds on the last play of a game that can determine if they can go to the playoffs or not, is a person that I cannot have at number 3 on this list. And yes, I'm weighting that heavier over the other plays that he might have made throughout the year, because these are the key things on why you would be number 3. You would make these big plays similar to what Brock Purdy in going to the Super Bowl and what CJ Stroud is being the catalyst for the turnaround of that team. Trevor Lawrence is neither. So he should be anywhere near number 3. He should actually probably be a fringe top 25, under 25 player at this point. But I think this is a overplay on the part of looking at a player because he's a quarterback and pushing him up the list.
Alex, I can't disagree with you at all. I really can't, because I'm with you and you hit on it. CJ Stroud and Brock Purdy, I think, both belong ahead of Trevor Lawrence. I am shocked they have him this high on the list. If he makes the list, I would have been okay with it, I guess. But at number 3 on this list, when you look at some of the players ranked behind him, Jamar Chase at 4, who's been a way better. Aiden Hutchinson at 6. He's been outstanding and consistent. And that's the key word I'm going to look at here, is because where's the consistency from Trevor Lawrence? This guy has been up and down. He had a terrible rookie season, which we all tend to just excuse because he had a bad coach. And look, I know coaching matters. I'm not saying it doesn't here, but we kind of just overlook his first year. Year 2, he takes a step forward, but he's been really just up and down since then. We have not seen anything close to the guy that we expected coming out of Clemson, this highly touted prospect. And I think that this is a perfect example of the bias that we have towards highly graded and highly drafted quarterback prospects. We're so slow to pivot away from our original thoughts on a guy when the play on the field so far has not shown a guy who deserves to be number 3 on this list. I completely agree with you, Alex. This is an egregious miss by PFF. I have no idea how they have him ranked that high. He's been very, very average at best, and I don't think average quarterbacks belong at number 3 on the top 25 under 25. Players that I think are ranked too high on this list. The first one that jumped out to me was at number 16, running back Bijan Robinson for the Atlanta Falcons. Look, we know this guy is really talented. We know he has a lot of potential to become one of the best backs in the league. But I think this grade, or this ranking rather, has way more to do with his potential and the promising future he might have versus actual production. And I have an issue with that.
I think I can speak for all fantasy owners. We were disappointed because he was a person that we drafted high, probably within the first 3 rounds, with the expectation to what you're speaking to. And though he had a solid year, I think he had about maybe 1,500 yards and 8 touchdowns. For us in total, it was a letdown based upon what the expectation was So I know if it was a letdown for us, it had to be a letdown with the Atlanta Falcons as well as the betting community to be talked about as the offensive rookie of the year as well.
Yeah, another guy that I think was ranked too high, even though he just barely made the cut for this list, his teammate at number 25, tight end Kyle Pitts for the Falcons. Now, look, he had 1,000 receiving yards his rookie year. The last 2 years, though, this guy's been a big disappointment from a productivity standpoint. Once again, I think this is another guy, super high expectations. And look, I'll be the first to point the finger at myself here. I had incredibly high grades on this guy coming out of the draft. I thought he was going to be an overnight superstar, and he's been solid, but I don't know if he's a lock to be one of the top 25 players under 25, and I think it's questionable that he should even be on this list.
Yeah, there's always going to be, for people that are listening to this in real time, I know what you're already saying in your head is, well, he had Tyler Heineke and Desmond Ridder as a quarterback room. The receiving talent pool that is on Atlanta, in consideration with the quarterbacks that he had, that there still should have been better production on his end.
Alex, are there some other guys that you think are just ranked too high, in your opinion, on this list?
I know there's a narrative that I have around what the Lions did with Jahmyr Gibbs, but at 21, I still think I would put Kyren Williams there simply because it was unexpected. It came out of nowhere. All the production that he had in terms of leading with yards per game as a rusher, he did within 11 games in the season. I think he's a better prospect. Not a better prospect, but he's one of the better running backs. I know Jahmyr Gibbs has the higher ceiling, but in terms of what he did as a rookie coming out of nowhere, similar to his teammate in Puka Nacua, I have to put Kyren Williams there as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, what about Puka Nacua? That's a player that I think needs to be mentioned. Now, he's on this list, but what do you think about his ranking on this list?
Well, Puka Nacua is ranking at number 12. I'm struggling to find why he's so low, even though I know there's a lot of metrics that are involved. But I can't have him lower than Garrett Wilson. I have to put him over Garrett Wilson. I understand Amon-Ra St. Brown. I believe he is a person that should be higher as well, above Garrett Wilson. So those are two players, 11 and 12, that I would have to put above Garrett Wilson.
Amon-Ra St. Brown has been absolutely awesome. There's no doubt about it. This guy's been a big-time overachiever based on where he was drafted. Granted, he was a guy that was one of my favorite mid-round picks when he got taken a couple of years ago by the Lions, but he has surpassed almost anybody's expectations. Nothing against Garrett Wilson. I think he's a really good player, but Puka Nacua has been borderline unstoppable these last 2 seasons in LA. How about we shift to a couple players that I think are ranked too low? I'm going to start with number 24 on this list, wide receiver Chris Olave for the New Orleans Saints. This is a guy who's had 1,000 receiving yards in each of his first 2 seasons, and they point this out in the article, playing with multiple quarterbacks and, quite frankly, some average to below average quarterback play at that. This is a team that doesn't have a whole lot of weapons, so he's getting a lot of attention. He's facing a lot of number 1 corners, and he's been quietly a really good player for the Saints. I was surprised to see him all the way down at 24. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, this is another player when you start to look and you're saying, well, once you get down to 23, 24, 25, you're looked at as a fringe player that just barely made the list, and I don't see that at all. Given the production, given the, I don't want to call it chaos, but given the low-end coaching, I think he should be higher on this list. Now, where to put him, I don't know. I don't know if I would put him above Garrett Wilson, given what Garrett Wilson was dealing with at quarterback and offensive coordinator, but he definitely should be higher.
Another guy that I was surprised to see at number 20, center Tyler Linderbaum for the Ravens. This was a guy that I absolutely loved coming out of the draft, a guy that I thought was a plug-and-play starter and was a steal where the Ravens got him late in the first round. They have a note here about his pass blocking and run blocking grade. The only player with grades above 78 at his position in 2023. He has quickly become one of the best centers in the league. So I thought he was a guy that'd be a lot closer to that top 10 list. I was a little surprised to see him back at 20.
Yeah, Tyler Linderbaum, I think he's been a stalwart on that line, in the middle of that line. That's really going to help them out coming up this year as well, seeing that they lost the entire right side of their line. But you know what, Brad? Right above him, Sam Laporta, and these are one of the few times I'll take a lap, specifically from a fantasy standpoint, because Sam Laporta was a guy I drafted in at least 3 to 4 of my fantasy drafts in the last 2 rounds, and I was very comfortable drafting him because I felt he was going to be a guy that performed. Obviously, he's an Iowa product, and if you know anything about Iowa, they are tight end U, and he came in gangbusters and what he did for that Lions organization, that Lions team.
He made my list last year when we were doing our draft coverage as one of my favorite sleepers in that draft class. And man, was he a superstar right out of the gate. You can make a case that he was the best tight end in the league last year. I mean, he was basically unguardable. He gave that offense such a huge spark and became such a go-to player for Jared Goff in that offense. 19, he might be too low. I mean, honestly, just looking at it, he might be too low. Now, granted, this is only one season of production, so maybe that factors into the equation here. But, man, I expect big things from him again this year, Alex. Who are some guys that you're looking at that you think might be too low, too high? What are you thinking here? A few guys that stand out on this list, Alex?
Perhaps maybe I should talk about a player or two that should have been on the list. I already mentioned Kyron Williams and Ernest Jones. How about Nick Bolton? We talked about Kyle Pitts, and, he's kind of a fringe guy, but how about Nick Bolton? I mean, do the Eagles beat the Chiefs without the play from Nick Bolton and the defensive plays that he made? And that was a fumble that he should have returned for a touchdown and been MVP. And the things that he's done, he's undersized. He's a thumper. He can also cover. He has speed. He has awareness. He has every single thing, quintessential thing you want in a middle linebacker. And the Chiefs were able to get him. He went under the radar. But since he's been in the league, he's just flashed every single time you've watched him.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by that one, too. I think you can make a case that he's a top 5 linebacker in the NFL. And his grades, according to PFF, are pretty solid, too. So that one's a little unusual. He didn't make this list, Alex. I'm with you. I think he's a guy that definitely got overlooked here. I'll tell you a couple guys that I'm just happy to see on this list. And I'm going to start at number 17, safety Javon Holland for the Miami Dolphins. This is a guy who's had a little bit of trouble staying healthy, but man, when he is on the field, he is absolutely one of the best safeties in the league. And I just don't think he gets the national media attention that he deserves. What a player this guy has become. And I'm just happy that PFF is showing him some recognition here, and he's made this list.
Yeah, Brad, you're absolutely right. Javon was a guy that I loved coming out of Oregon. I think there was a lot of, in terms of where he would be playing, I think a lot of people weren't sure he could play the safety position. I saw a lot of people talk, or rather a lot of scouts talking about him as a linebacker, more of a hybrid linebacker. But I think he's settled into that defense. He's shown he can play the position, and he's just been a stalwart there. Actually, one of the few bright spots on that Miami Dolphins defense, as they're going through a lot of transition right now.
Another guy, Alex, I was excited to not only see this list, and I guess I'm not surprised to see him on here. I'm just happy to see him up kind of high on this list because he's a guy that I think gets disrespected all the time, whether it's fans or media. Quarterback Brock Purdy at number 8. This is a guy that I think a lot of people questioned his rookie year, wondering if it was a fluke, wondering if it had more to do with the team and the talent around him and his coach. And I've said for a while now, I'm not trying to say those things don't matter. He is in a good situation, but PFF does a really good job of grading players individually and looking at each snap, each play, processing their decisions, their accuracy, all the things that go into playing the position at a high level. And this guy has been outstanding. He's not a dink and dunk guy. He is a guy that pushes the ball down the field. He makes big plays. I don't think he ever gets enough credit for his athleticism, his escapability in the pocket, and just how good he is at keeping his eyes down the field and making plays for his guys. Happy to see him on this list because his 2 years in the league have been absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, Purdy goes under the radar. I mean, Brad, me and you share a space where, he's called the pumpkin for the most part. But I think he's kind of overcome a lot of what people may have thought about him, and he deserves his ranking where he is at number 8.
Now, there's a couple guys on this list that I'm just going to come out and say it, Alex. I flat got wrong when they got drafted. These were guys that I did not think would be as good of players as they've turned out to be. And I'm going to start with number 15 on this list, offensive lineman Tyler Smith for the Dallas Cowboys. This guy was a first-round pick, and when he came out, I did not have a first-round grade on him. I was critical of that draft selection. I thought the Cowboys reached for this guy. I thought he had a chance to turn into a good player, but I didn't think he was worthy of that selection. And man, has he proven me wrong.
It's funny, there's a lot of talk about the Dallas Cowboys, but one thing that they've done probably over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years is draft offensive linemen. I mean, you can go down the list, but specifically speaking about Tyler Smith, a guy that had to fill in immediately for Tyron Smith, a guy who's going to more than likely be a Hall of Famer, but had to fill in for him at left tackle. And then when he came back the next year, had to play left guard. So he's versatile, and he can step right in and do a capable job at I don't want to say an elite level, but at a very good level, coming in with a very good grade. Tyler Smith, a guy that sometimes we get punched in the face for, and figuratively when we miss. Now, Brad mentioned that, and I have had to take a lot of punches and blows, for this next play I'm about to mention, and it's CJ Stroud. I have a narrative which has been thoroughly talked about on this pod, but I will say it again. I do not believe in any Ohio State quarterback throughout their entire existence as a team. They have never put a successful quarterback into the NFL. For all the people, the Eddie Georges, the Chris Carters, and whoever else you want to name, they've never put a successful quarterback into the league. In fact, the most successful quarterback prior to CJ Stroud was a guy named Mike Tomczak. If you don't believe me, go look for yourself. But as of now, CJ Stroud looks to be trending up and to finally break the 100-year stigma of what I feel about Ohio State quarterbacks. He has a few more years to go, because I don't truly evaluate a quarterback. I always look into 3 to 5 years before I start saying what they are. But out the gate, he looks like he's a guy, and that entire Houston team, which is why you see 2 people on that team on this list, are all trending up. So let's watch and see what CJ Stroud does. And yes, I was wrong on him.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone on that one, though, Alex. CJ Stroud was a guy that I think a lot of people had questions about. I don't think anybody, even the people that were really supportive of Stroud, that liked him coming out, I don't think any of them thought he'd be this good. The unanimous Rookie of the Year, breaking records, taking his team to the playoffs, having a ton of success year one. He was lights out. There's no doubt about it. He's already entered into that conversation of top 10 quarterbacks in the league really quickly. Now, we're going to have to see what he does in year 2. Something that you always like to talk about, Alex, is let's see what they do when they get more tape on you. So to your point, we're going to really be interested to see if this breakout season can roll over into year 2. But outstanding player. I totally don't have a problem with him being on the list. Another guy, Alex, that I think I just got wrong when I did the draft breakdown for this player, number 2 on the list, cornerback Sauce Gardner for the New York Jets. Look, I liked his tape. I liked this player coming out. I thought he had the potential to become a really good corner. I had no idea that he was going to be this good, and I'll admit that. And I questioned the competition that he faced in college. Playing at Cincinnati, they played a lot of cupcakes. He never really faced any high-level NFL caliber wide receivers in college, and it really had me questioning the tape, Alex, of is this guy going to be able to translate that level of play in college to becoming an elite cornerback in the NFL? Man, he's proven me wrong, because he has become arguably the best cornerback in the game and one of the youngest in the game to do it as well. He's been absolutely outstanding.
And Brad, you're not alone with that assessment of Sauce Gardner. I had the same thing until I believe it was after the Alabama game, or maybe even after the championship game, when I heard what players said and also what Nick Saban said. And when they went to face Cincinnati, he said, we're not going to throw to that side. And I said, well, why would the guy who's really a defensive savant in college football, why would he say that? And then when he went to explain, he said, we're not taking any chances over there whatsoever. So despite everything that you said about him, Brad, which is 1,000% true, for a guy like Nick Saban with the team that he had going against Cincinnati, for him to have that high regard for Sauce Gardner, I had to take a step back. And even though what I saw with my own eyes, I had to give the respect to Nick to say, you know what, there must be something there that he sees that I can't see, for him to say that we're not even testing that side of the field.
Now, there's a couple guys on this list, Alex, that I absolutely got right when they got drafted. And I'm going to start with number 5 on this list, safety Kyle Hamilton for the Baltimore Ravens. This is a guy that, if you guys remember, when he came out of the draft, I said he was the best player in this draft. He was the number 1 player on my board. He slid on draft day really because of positional value more than anything else. It had nothing to do with the player, but I thought he was the best player in that draft. And man, he had a breakout season last year. He has become one of the most versatile defenders in the NFL, a do-it-all guy who has really become arguably the best safety in the game. He's certainly in the discussion. What a player Kyle Hamilton has become.
Yeah, same sentiment here, Brad. I thought he was the best player in the draft. Like, he was going, not just the best prospect, but I also thought that he was a can't miss prospect in this draft. And that's very hard for me to do. I usually reserve that for offensive linemen for the most part, but he was a player that I thought, this is a can't miss guy, leader, hard nosed, knows what he's supposed to be doing. He came out the gate and it didn't look like that at first, but as you saw this last year, he popped out the plastic and started acting brand new, as the kids like to say.
Now, the other guy that I absolutely got right is number 1 on this list, Alex, offensive tackle Penei Sewell for the Detroit Lions. I used the term generational prospect when he came out of the draft, and he's a player I got to see play live a few different times, watched a bunch of tape on this guy as well. And the player that I saw coming out of Oregon was somebody, I don't use the term generational very often because I think it gets overused. And I think it devalues what the meaning actually is to be a generational prospect. But I thought Penei Sewell was absolutely generational. I thought he was the best tackle that I have ever evaluated since doing this. Unbelievable player at the college level, and it has absolutely translated into the NFL. I don't think there's really any doubt at this point that you can make a case that he's the best tackle in the entire NFL, and he's only 23 years old. His PFF grades are off the charts, and when you watch the tape, it's obvious why.
Yeah, and as I said previously, I usually reserve them for offensive linemen. This was one of those guys that I said, you know, this is probably the best offensive line product that we've seen, or I won't say that we've seen, that I would liken to the Walter Jones, Orlando Pace level of grade that I had. Penei Sewell was a guy that I said I earmark. I said you could pen him and not pencil him. You could pen him in for a 10-year starter in this league.
Did you know that Pint Glass Football is more than just this podcast? We have an exclusive newsletter. Sign up for free at pintglassfootball.com to receive articles and insights delivered straight to your inbox. But wait, there's more. We're excited to announce our brand new YouTube channel. Not only can you listen to our podcast on YouTube, but you'll also find exclusive video content waiting for you. So hit the pause button right now and go subscribe to our newsletter, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube to stay connected with the latest football news and our exclusive content. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. We personally love the pick'em game. Just pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Download the Underdog Fantasy app and sign up today with promo code PGF. That's promo code PGF to claim your special pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount.
So, Brad, last year coming into the season, Pat Surtain was a guy I believe we had number 1 as the best DB in the league. Now, the funny thing is he had an underwhelming year. And you know what? This is probably a person, again, you all should be PGF subscribers. If you're not, there's a pod that we did on bounce back players. Perhaps this is a person that we may have missed as a bounce back player, given his level of play that he's displayed over his first 3 years in the league. But Pat Surtain, loved this guy, was a fan of his father, and he just obviously has the bloodline, coachable. We saw what he was at the peak of his game. Obviously, over the past year, there's been a lull. There's been a couple of change. There's been some change over at the defensive coordinator position. So perhaps that's what led to that as well. But not only does he belong on this list, but he should also perhaps belong on our bounce back player list as well. Brad, looking at him at number 13 and then taking a look just one spot down in Will Anderson, a player that I don't think he was a bad player. I always liken a lot of things to Madden. I just thought I saw the Texans pull a move out of my Madden game when they traded up to number 3 to nab Will Anderson 2. I thought it was a reach, and I wasn't sure how it was going to play out, but boy, was I wrong.
Alex, I got to take the L on that one too, because when we evaluated the Texans draft and we talked about that move, it was a shocking move for them to take CJ Stroud at 2, trading up, like you mentioned, to get Will Anderson at 3. We both really liked Will Anderson, but we didn't think he was worthy of that aggressive of a move to get him at number 3. Man, we missed on that because he went on to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was absolutely outstanding. And after one season, he already finds himself at number 14 on this list. And look, I don't have a problem with it because this guy is probably primed for another big season. Clearly, DeMeco Ryans saw something that we didn't.
Brad, to close everything out, I want to give a honorable shout out to Charles Cross, but a guy that I think out of all of the people that we mentioned that should have possibly made the list, I think Kayvon Thibodeau was a glaring miss by the team on this one because I think his production, and again, I know we get into the metrics, but I think what he did from his first to second year, leaps and bounds, he's a guy that definitely, if we had to say who will we take off and put on, I'm assuming we would probably both remove Kyle Pitts and put Kayvon Thibodeau on this list.
It's a great call, Alex. I was really surprised not to see him at least make this list. He's been a really, really good player. And you're right. He had a bit of a breakout year last year. And for some reason, like you mentioned, the PFF grades didn't really reflect that. Now, I know they do a lot more analytics and a lot more deep dive stuff than most. I'm not trying to discredit that at all. But he was a productive player, a disruptive player, and he's been a really good player his first 2 years in the league. So I'm surprised by that as well. Now, a guy that's a little further down the list, I think has the chance to still become a really, really special player. Number 23 cornerback Derek Stingley for the Texans. This was the guy that I had graded higher than Sauce Gardner, the guy that we mentioned earlier on this pod. I absolutely loved this guy's tape coming out of LSU. I thought he had elite shutdown ability. Now, injuries have played a big role here. Some of those injuries I think have kind of hampered his development. But man, when he's on the field and healthy, he has really flashed that talent that we saw coming out of LSU.
A guy that I think there may have been a little bit of lag on him coming into the draft. If we remember, I think he didn't have a great last season at LSU. Obviously, all those players left from that historic team, Joe Burrow and those. So he was kind of left there by himself. So I think there was a lull in his play. So that's why he might have been downgraded a little bit. Not that he wasn't going to be a great player, but just his last year at LSU. But without a doubt, he is part of the renaissance, which is with the Houston Texans and what they're doing over there.
If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. But once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.
Zencastr is the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. It provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content all from one dashboard. Zencastr's post-production process takes the headache out of audio production. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. Coordinating all your guests to record in person is painful and tedious. Easily invite up to 11 participants per recording with one click. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code PGFP, and you'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.